Hi, and welcome to our presentation, The Mass Effect, How Opportunistic Workers Drift into Cybercrime. I'm Masara Paquette-Clouston from GoSecure.
And I'm Serge-Olivier Paquette from SecureWorks.
And we also want to thank Sebastian Garcia from the Stratosphere Laboratory, as well as Maria Jose Ergiaga from Cisco System, who both have participated in the research. So today what we're doing is we are presenting our research journey that goes from studying botnet masters, or at least we thought, all the way up to uncovering an informal economy involved or potentially involved in cybercrime.
And we also thought it was a very good opportunity to present three research techniques that we believe are unusual in the field of cybersecurity research, but could be beneficial for other projects. So let's jump into the background and how this research came alive.
So it all started a few years ago when the Stratosphere Laboratory uncovered the Geost botnet while monitoring the HTBot proxy malware. What is Geost? Well, it's an Android banking Trojan botnet targeting mainly Russian citizens. It has infected over 800,000 Russian phones and also was estimated to have made millions of dollars. If you have any questions related to Geost infrastructure, CNC panels, and all that, you can look online. There are two really good presentations, one from Byers Bolton, the other one from Black Hat Europe, done by the Stratosphere Laboratory. What is of interest today is while doing that investigation, Veronica Valeros found a chat log on VirusTotal that contained private discussions among individuals involved at spreading the botnet.
So this really triggered this research that we're presenting today. So this private chat log between people directly involved into spreading malware was a very, very unique opportunity because very seldom can we assess firsthand conversation between people spreading malware. So this chat log is a Skype leak of about 6,000 messages that spreads from between 2017 and 2018 for about 11 months, and it's between 32 individuals. So we know they were discussing Geost because they were exchanging key information about the CNC internal commands, IP addresses and domains, as well as some freshly infected APKs that they shared among themselves. So the conversations are in Russian, and they were translated by a security researcher named Anna Shorikova, which is also Russian speaking. And in the conversations, there are 32 individuals, but only three three main important ones: an entrepreneur, a developer, and a webmaster. And we want you to remember them because they're going to come later in the presentation. Now, the very interesting thing is that in this chat log, they were also mentioning conversations that happened on a public space.
And really rarely do we have information on private discussions as well as public ones. So we pivoted to understanding what they were discussing on a public forum called searchengines.guru, which has over 500,000 users. This specific forum is a Russian-speaking internet marketing platform, and all the users discussing on it were kind of considered like an informal workforce, as you're going to see in a little bit. So this presentation is divided in 5 large themes that we called acts, and we're going to go over each of them in the next 30 minutes.
So the first act that we're going to see is called an informal workforce, and we're going to investigate what is the forum and a little bit what are people discussing on it. So the forum, as advertised on its homepage, is a website allowing users to discuss issues related to creating and promoting websites on the internet. So on the surface, everything looks clean. So the forum has been alive for the last 20 years or so, and has more than 400,000 users registered. And all in all, there has been more than 14 million posts for the span of the 20 years. As you can see from the graph here, the peak of the forum use was in 2010 and has since been in slow decline. So there could be many reasons for this. One of them being that the whole field of internet marketing and web marketing has become more difficult over the years, mainly because of various protections and security measures from the search engines.
Notice also in the timeline that we added the specific time frame when the chat log, the individuals in the private chat log were active, so in 2017 and 2018. And we also plotted the first known Geost activity and the last known Geost activity, which is 2016 and the end of 2019. Now, it's important to mention that all the data that we're presenting today that we used from this forum, but although also many others, was possible because we had an academic access to the Flare Systems database. So Flare System is a startup based in Montreal that does darknet monitoring platform and also monitoring of all other kinds of platforms on the clear web. So we want to thank them and mention their collaboration in the research.
So what do people talk about on this informal space? So the forum is divided in 9 main categories, each of them being divided in subcategories with various amount of posts. So the categories are such as how to monetize websites, how to build websites, and various services and exchanges for webmasters, as well as how to optimize search engine.
When you look at the categories, nothing looks shady. And obviously, let's not lie to ourselves. Like, internet marketing is usually related to shady activities somehow, sometimes. So when you look at the subcategories, you kind of get hints by one category that some dubious activities are happening on the platform. So the category doorways and cloaking definitely refers to black hat SEO and thus, manipulating user into clicking on links that they wouldn't want to click on.
But we're still light years away from operating or being the mastermind behind a large-scale botnet.
So looking at this, it kind of inspired us to talk about informal economies. So what do we refer by that? Is all income earning activities that are not regulated by the state in economic environment where such activities would usually be regulated.
So you can think of many examples that people are familiar with. A waiter that wouldn't declare 100% of its tip, for example, or people who sell goods on Kijiji and eBay. Well, there is an amount after which you should be declaring revenues and pay taxes. What happens if you don't?
So it's important to know it's not the product or the service that it is illegal. It is rather the means by which it is produced or distributed that is.
So given this information, the question that we ask ourselves is, how can we get a quick understanding of the users of the forum, or can we map the forum users to grasp their behavior? So fortunately, there is a set of techniques in machine learning that maybe will help to do so. So that will be the first technique we're going to see. So first of all, thanks again to the Flare database, we collected the data from each post for the years of 2017 and 2018, so for 2 years. And in this data, we have the username, the topic, the content category, subcategory, and the date, and so on and so forth. In order to do machine learning, what we need is a numerical representation of the users. And what we mean by that, well, a numerical representation is basically a vector of number. So we constructed the fingerprint of the users by just summing over the span of the 2 years the categories in which the user has posted. So that would give us a user, like a unit of user. Now what we did is that we did this for each of the users that were present on the forum for these 2 years. And that would give us a big matrix. We just see a little glimpse here. That would give us a very, very big matrix. And we want to make sense out of this, so to be able to see if there are patterns in the users. So basically, what we want is a map of the forum based on the users, a 2D representation. Now, there exists a technique that it does exactly this. It's called UMAP, and it was developed by Leland McInnes and John Healy from the Tufts Institute, and they were very kind to help us get a better grasp of what's going on under the hood. So basically what UMAP does is that it takes the data in high dimension. In this case, it would be each point would be a user in 9 dimension, 9 being the number of categories. And then from this space, it would create a graph. And the graph, the nodes would be the users, and they would be connected if they are nearest neighbors in some specific kind of way. And then from this graph in 9 dimensions, it would just project it in 2 dimensions in the plane, and then untangle the graph using some clever algorithms in order to preserve this relationship, this distance nearest neighbor relationship. Now, I put a lot of details under the rug, but the code is very simple to use and the documentation is very good and you can find it online. It's open source. So we did exactly this with our users and we projected them on a 2D map and we get the map. So this is a representation of the forum users. And even though it looks like a mess, it's filled with information. So bear with me. First of all, the X and Y axis don't mean anything. They're not interpretable in a UMAP embedding. So we just removed it. What matters is the relationship between the points. So users who have similar posting behaviors will be close together in the map. Now, what we see here is that there are 9 arms. And interestingly enough, these arms represent categories in the forum. So really the clusters that we see are groups of users who post mainly in one category. So on average, more in the category. But another thing is preserved is the magnitude of the phenomenon. So how much they post. So users who are at the outer edge of the arms are users who post more on average than users who are closer to the center. Now, a little higher level of structure, we see that there are 2 arms on the right and the rest of the arms on the left. And the 2 arms on the right are close together and also short in length, meaning that users in these categories are probably not so passionate or they don't post as much as in the other categories.
Remember earlier we talked about the private chat log and 3 individuals who were forming the bulk of the conversations? Well, since they were these individuals discussing on the forum too, you may be wondering, where are they situated on the map? Well, we mapped them and we see that they are much more at the center of the map than at the outer edge of arms. So it looks like these individuals could be more opportunistic or speaking less than other individuals who would be more passionate about their topics.
So really this relationship of maybe looking opportunistic was really interesting to us. So we asked the question, is this the case? So what kind of business are they actually involved in? Well, fortunately, we have the chat log.
Okay, so this leads us to our second act, dancing on the crime line. And you're soon going to see why we called it that way. So we talked about the chat log earlier. You remember 6,000 messages? Well, it was formed of one entrepreneur and 32 of his business partners. As we mentioned, however, 2 of them formed the bulk of the conversation. Hence, there was 3 individuals that were key in the private chat log. You may be wondering what they were doing. Well, they were developing Android portals to be able to spread infected APKs. So we took a screenshot of one of their websites so you can have an idea of what it looks like. It's basically just websites where you go on and you download applications that would have special features such as better. So we took a screenshot of the website so you could have a better idea of what it looks like. And as you can see, you just go on the website and you can download various APKs that have special features, maybe unlock features as well. If you went on this website in 2017 or in 2018, you would have most likely downloaded a Geost APK, which means that the application icon would have disappeared. You would have thought that the application installation just didn't work and your phone would be infected with a banking Trojan. So what we did with the private chat log is a thematic analysis. This is another method that we wanted to present. It's really used in criminology and in social science to extract meaning out of textual data. So what you do is you read the text and you find themes associated to the text, and then you do this over and over again. So we did this, and we ended up with 3 themes, which we want to present today. The first theme is adverse business environment. So there was no doubt that these individuals were facing unreliable business partners, unstable payments, declining business prospects, and low profitability.
So given the uniqueness of this data set, this presentation would be very sad and a bit boring if we didn't go into the conversation and show you some sample. So here we go. So for example, in October 2017, the webmaster tells to the entrepreneur, Well, there's nothing you can do. You should always be prepared. This business is not stable. Hence the idea of adverse business environment. And then the same character says over and over again to the entrepreneur that he has trouble getting the money. And he knows about the money. They will not give the money yet. They send the money. So you see that this person has trouble getting paid. Hence, really, it enforces the idea of adversity.
The second team was amateur work. So these individuals seem to be lacking technical skills as well as working with and building defective tools.
So again, let's jump into the conversations and see some examples. So the developer in 2017 says that the sites are not high quality, that they will not last long. And I mean, this is a developer acknowledging his lack of expertise. And then the entrepreneur in November of the same year says that he doesn't know how to split the traffic. So they have trouble getting by and constructing their infrastructure.
And then our third team was leniency towards criminality, which kind of links back to our second act, dancing on the crime line. So these guys, they were definitely involved in shady activities and being aware of it. They were constantly fighting security measures and all of that to seek economic independence.
So again, in November 2017, a new character, the affiliate marketer, talks about the conversion rate and how they are different, but there is no guarantee that the sum will be better than from legal. Hence, acknowledging that being illegal pays more than being legal. And in a very interesting piece of conversation between the entrepreneur and the webmaster, the entrepreneur tells the other character to try to recrypt and install. And in this context, recrypt means obfuscating such that the APK is not being flagged by security tools.
So these three teams kind of encompasses most of the discussions that these individuals had within the private chat log. If there is one kind of big key takeaway is definitely they were not the butt masters or the motivated offender behind the Geost botnet, but they seemed rather to be those individuals at the periphery of the criminal scheme, helping for the infected APKs to spread in the wild. So, given that we know now what they're doing or what they talked about in their private conversations, let's go and look at what they're doing on the forum in the public space. So what we did is we gathered information on the three individuals who spoke also on the public forum. And the first thing we asked was, who are they talking to, right? So we used a map and colored each of the individuals that were in the same thread as the entrepreneur, the webmaster, and the developer. And as you can see, although there's a small cluster in the middle, well, they seem to be interacting with people who are positioned everywhere in the forum. The second thing that we did is we wanted to assess qualitatively what they're talking about. So we read each of their interactions. That represents about 2,000 interactions. We thank Maria for doing this. It was very hard work, just trying to comprehend the meaning. And what we ended up finding, though, is, well, they use the forum to help develop their Android website, and they try to find business partners through, interacting with other forum users.
And what's really striking here is that never in their public interactions did they mention Geost or spreading any kind of malware, even though a lot of these business interactions were about creating these infected portals. And that's very interesting because it was covertly displayed in a public space. So, of course, it triggered to us the question, is this dance between criminality and informality commonplace? Is this a large-scale phenomenon?
So from there, we kind of changed scale. So our goal was to assess whether the forum, which we conceptualized as an informal space, had users who would also be involved in potentially cybercrime activities. And to do that, we developed a concept called drifters. Drifters are informal workers, or more specifically forum users, who also participate in the cybercrime forums.
So our goal here was to find a measure of the number of drifters on the forum. So people who both speak on the forum and also in more criminally prone platform. And by criminally prone, we mean platform that acknowledge and that publicly state that they are spaces to share cybercrime information. So they embody the criminal ethos. So we use a technique called username matching because there are researches that state that people tend to reuse their usernames between different platforms. So basically, you can think of nicknames in InfoSec, which are very common things. People tend to reuse them. So in order to, because of course the technique is not perfect, there will be false positives and there will be people who change their name because it's a choice of the user. We decided to increase the entropy of the username that we sample in order to do this analysis. And increasing the entropy has the advantage of reducing the number of false positives and avoiding us to look into each of the conversations to make sure that they are exactly the same users. And so in order to increase this entropy, we chose usernames that were at least 5 characters long, add an uppercase, a number, or a special character. So that would constitute our sample on the informal platform. And then we use the Flare database. So we search for these specific username in the Flare database and checked in which platforms these users were speaking.
And we had to develop another filter because when we search for a specific username in the Flare systems, then we get all of their comments on other platforms, but these comments can date back a long time ago. So we decided to only keep comments that happened +2 or minus years of the private chat log that was in 2017 and 2018. So the comments spanned from 2015 to the end of 2020.
So using these two filters, the time frame and the username, what we got is out of the Flare database are 38 platforms, 17 of them being on the clear web, 21 being on the dark web. And it's important to emphasize that each of these platforms, even the one on the clear web, are platforms that openly advertise themselves as criminal spaces. So spaces to share criminal information. Now, the most common of these, you can think of null.to, Dark Money, Best Hack Forum, Exploit.in, Black Hat World, Club to Cred, which are all related to either cybercrime or stealing information.
So out of this whole filtering process, we ended up finding 1,500 drifters out of the 21,000 users that fitted the filter. This represents about 7.2% of the whole forum population, and we mapped them on our forum map. And as you can see, these drifters are kind of placed all over in the forum.
So since that seemed to be, there doesn't seem to be any pattern, as statisticians and data scientists, we asked ourselves where there must be some way to differentiate the drifters from the non-drifters. So we asked the question, are there characteristics to identify them on the forum? Are they special? Do they form a specific group? So we devised a sequence of variables that we thought could help us to discriminate them. So maybe it would be different for the drifters and the non-drifters. For example, the activity rate, the diversification level, various keywords for potential business interactions or specialized topics. Now, since these variables were far from being Gaussian or normal, we couldn't use traditional statistical tests. So we use Mann-Whitney U-tests, which are tests that do not assume anything from the underlying distribution. They just use the rank instead of the direct value. So just a detail. So on the next slide, we're going to present you 16 of the variables that we devised. And don't waste time reading the titles. What matters is the shape of the distribution. So again, I'm stopping you. Don't try to read the titles, get the overall picture. So in pale blue, you have the drifters, and in purple, you have the non-drifters, so the rest of the population. And what we can see here is that the samples are the same. So the shape of the distribution is the same, whatever the group. Now, for the statistical test, when there was statistical significance to distinguish, the effect size was very, very small. It was negligible. So from this data, it's not possible to distinguish them based on the variables that we devised.
So what can we conclude from this? Well, it seems like drifters and non-drifters are indistinguishable, at least based on the discriminatory variables that we could think of. And this leads us to conclude that probably the drifter population is larger than 7%, And thus, there are many drifters that are within our non-drifter sample, kind of hindering the analysis and the results. And it even stresses that this is most likely a lower bound, right? And there are much more. And now that we know that there's an overlap, between criminally prone spaces and the forum that we studied, the next question that we wondered or that we asked was, well, is there a relationship between informality and criminality over time? Or do we see individuals speaking in the informal forum and then slowly moving out to more criminally prone platforms through time? So this leads us to our fourth act, migration, where we want to assess this, pattern in time. And how did we do this? Well, we developed a migration measure. And to do this, we developed a migration measure based on the EI ratio, which is a really widely used measure in social network science. EI stands for external internal. In our research, external means a person who would be posting on cybercrime platforms, and internal means a person who would be posting on the informal platform. And what we want to assess is the ratio of external against internal platforms posting over every year. So if a person scores 1 in the EI ratio, it means that the person has perfectly migrated and thus is only speaking on cybercrime platform. If the person scores 0, it means that there is a perfect balance in the person's posts. So the person posts equally on a cybercrime platform and the informal platform. And if the person scores -1, it means there's no migration at all, and the person is only speaking on the forum. And what we did is we calculated the EI ratio for all drifters that were active from 2012 to 2020. So for every of these years. And then we mapped every user's trajectory. So here you have an example of 2 users. You can see that they go from these 2 users, they go from the informal platform speaking only on this, and then in 2016, they kind of drift and they speak only on cybercrime platforms. This is great. We see 2 users and it's easy to see kind of the drifting, the migration. But what happens if we have, let's say, 1,000 trajectories? What can you do? How can you find pattern?
So we asked this question: how can we find patterns, or how can we cluster groups of users based on their drifting pattern? So thankfully, there exists a family of technique in data science. Well, a lot of techniques in data science to do so. One of them being the group-based trajectory modeling, which is an instantiation of a finite mixture model. We're going to see what we mean. So first, let's introduce a bit of statistical terminology. So a latent explanatory variable is a variable that's important that you cannot observe directly from the data. You rather have to infer it through analysis, so through inferential analysis. In our case, this latent variable would be the number of groups, so really how to segment the users. So the first step in this group-based trajectory modeling is to determine the good number of group, and we're going to see what we mean by good. And then a mixture model, as in finite mixture model, is a model in which the total variability that you observe, so that the total effect, is rather the result of subgroups, so subpopulations. So in our case, it would really be the clusters of similar users. So each of them have the same variability, have the same pattern, but when you observe everything, you see the whole thing. So the second step would be to determine the shape of each of these distributions for the groups. And by shape, we mean, are they doing like this, like a sigmoid? Are they moving quadratically or linearly? So we determine this shape. And then the last step is, given these finite models, so given these submodels, we need to find the best shape, so the best parameters for the shape given the data. So we use a technique called maximum likelihood that will maximize the probability of observing the data given the model.
And then you may be wondering, how do we find the best model? Well, we repeat this over and over again, trying different numbers of groups and different shapes in the trajectories of the groups. And we try to minimize the Bayesian information criterion while doing this. And without a doubt, throughout our whole analysis, the best model for us was a 3-group model. hence like presented here. What you can see is we have two trajectories. Combined together, they represent 25% of the population, and they both drift from the forum all the way to cybercrime platforms through time. There is also one additional trajectory, the blue one. It represents near 75% of the population, and what you can see is it's quite flat. So this trajectory illustrates that 75% of the population will tend to stay within the forum through time.
So the next natural thing to do, of course, was to plot these users on the map. So here it is. As you can see, again, unsurprisingly, there doesn't seem to be a very strong pattern or a very strong cluster. There might be more users toward the center, maybe meaning that these users don't have a very strong allegiance, and that's something we could already infer from their location on the map. But other than this, they seem to be placed all over the forum.
There are about 75% of drifters who will favor informality over cybercrime platforms, and about 25% who seem to drift permanently, so posting on the informal platform and then slowly moving to posting more on cybercrime platforms. What we can conclude from this is, well, it seems like most drifters are criminal curious, and we coined that term to refer to these individuals who will mainly post on the informal platform, and based on their posting pattern, will post a little bit in cybercrime ones, but they will do it really minimally. So they will favor staying in the informal space.
So then we wanted to generalize, is this concerning? And if it is, to what extent is this? So that would trigger our last act, the mass effect. By mass effect, we don't mean any references to the very successful video game franchise. What we refer to is a term in medicine in which a growing mass, a tumor, is growing as to push its surrounding and then pushing the tissues and the organs around it, hence increasing the initial problem scale, so creating a ripple effect in the body. And we thought it was a good analogy because if the malware industry, like motivated offender trying to spread a botnet, for example, is growing, well, there is a large informal workforce surrounding it that it maybe get hooked to it after a while. So in order to get a little bit of understanding of the scale of this problem, we collected data from other similar platform as the forum. So here they are, and we just sum their advertised number of users and apply the same tight lower bound, so the same 7%, and that would give us 500,000 individuals that would be criminal curious.
And it doesn't matter whether we say 500,000 or a million or 2 million. What we want to say, at least, is there is a mass. There are people who are ready to work. And this is what matters, right? So what we conclude from our analysis is there is a large informal workforce evolving at the periphery of the malware industry that is necessary to its operation. So the individuals that we studied in the private chat log, they were not the motivated offender. They were not the people behind Geost, but they were rather these individuals, like the workforce surrounding it, allowing the Geost operators to spread their infected APKs. And these surrounding individuals, we believe, well, they may or may contribute. I mean, think of the second act with dancing on the crime line. But based on our findings and studying the informality and criminality relationship over time, we believe that they would probably rather not. And it means that there are possibilities to maybe avoid them drifting into cybercriminal activities by, for example, changing their opportunistic landscape. So how do we conclude? What is the key takeaway from this presentation? Well, we think that there is a need to dig further on the mass effect and the role of informal economies, where drifters are dancing on the crime line at the periphery of the cybercrime industry. And more importantly, start thinking beyond the concept of motivated offender. Our research, what it shows is most people or lots of people involved in cybercrime will not necessarily even be aware of it, or will do it, but not as motivated offenders developing the very sophisticated scheme. So by using concepts like we developed in this research, Mass Effect, drifters, informal economies, we can kind of bring more nuance to the narrative and potentially a better understanding of the complex phenomenon that is at play right now.
And as a takeout or something to bring home, we also thought that the three techniques we presented, the UMAP, the qualitative thematic analysis, and the group-based trajectory modeling, we think they can be used in other research. So if you have any question, feel free to ask us. It will be a pleasure to explain in more details how they work.
And as a final mention, we want to thank Flare Systems for allowing us to use their data, the Stratosphere Research Laboratory, who's always been a really great research partner, and all their members. And also, if you like the different drawings in our presentation, it's Jeremy McKenzie, a designer from Tungat.ca, who helped us. And we want to thank also our respective organization, Go Secure and SecureWorks. Thank you very much, and we'll be there for questions.